Everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to see so many faces today in the audience. We've got an amazing panel here today, and we're going to be talking about all things brand and how that impacts on all elements of the business. So, without further ado, I'm going to very quickly introduce myself, and I'll hand over to my panelists, who are going to give a brief introduction, and then we're going to get stuck straight in. So, very quickly, if you haven't already, please download the app. You can ask questions, and we would encourage you, go and ask questions. I've got the iPad, and we'll be able to answer those at the end. So my name is Cat Kevern. I am the Managing Director of Electric Cat and the Network of Women in Events. So we do all things B2B marketing for event suppliers. So yeah, I'll hand over to you guys for a very quick introduction.
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Olivia Breene, and I'm founder and CEO of a company called Lateralus B, and I work across lots of different areas within the industry, very much on growth strategy, which of course brand is a huge component of that.
Hi everyone, I'm Melanie Parkinson, and I'm the head of brand at System C. We're a healthcare app company, so we sell to the NHS predominantly.
Hello, my name's Christian. I'm the marketing director for Jägermeister in the UK. We are an alcoholic spirit.
We love to
fans
have
in the
him on
room,
our panel.
right? Yeah, we're the biggest liqueur in the world. We're the #1 shot in the UK. And to give you one piece of knowledge, it's best consumed ice cold as a neat shot at minus 18 degrees Celsius.
So should we do a shot?
Yeah,
We should.
yeah, we've got water.
Yeah, water.
I almost did bring some, but I thought maybe not. So, yeah, I'd actually be very curious. In the audience, could I please get a quick raise of hands? Are you an event planner, producer, manager, director on the event side? Okay, great, amazing. And do we have any marketeers in the room? Anyone who works on the marketing team? Okay, great, perfect. You're in the right place. So we're going to be talking about how brand isn't just a logo. It's not just a set of colours and a font and something that lives in a 100-page PowerPoint presentation that nobody understands. What we're going to be exploring is how brand can really touch on all different areas of the business and how that shows up internally, whether that's in HR, whether that's in culture and attracting new talent. So there's so much we're going to cover today. But maybe, Christian, I'll come to you first. Tell us a little bit more about how you guys do brand and activations and engaging with events and what that means for Jägermeister as a company.
Yeah, so our company primarily produces and distributes Jägermeister. That's what I'm going to basically, most of my day is about Jägermeister. We have Terramana, which is a tequila as well, but I'm going to talk about Jägermeister now. It's a very emotional brand. Yes, it's about awareness. Yes, it's about consumption, obviously, but there's this middle thing about bringing an emotional experience that consumers need to experience to live, to really get the brand. And I think events play a pivotal role for that, for us to create a space where they can really experience what the brand is all about. And at the same time, it's a fantastic driver to sample our product in the way I just described, in the perfect serve, as we call it. So in that sense, events tick a number of boxes, and they can range from small events, third-party events where we just show up with a small bar, to big festivals. We had an activation at Reading Festivals, for instance, a few weeks ago, which was our biggest activation this year, where we have a full immersive brand experience for thousands of consumers who go through the door every day.
And I think when it comes to brand and showing up, it's not just about, as I mentioned earlier, not just about the logo and what that looks like, but maybe I'd love to come to you, Olivia. Tell me a little bit more about authenticity and how does that play in, and what does authenticity mean when we talk about branding?
I think very much for me, I work with a lot of different leadership teams and a lot of different brands, and it's bringing it back to the culture inside first. So in my company, I look at from an outside in, but very much so it's really culminating what's inside. So that's how that's represented outside in the market. So very much for me, I suppose, is trying to delve into the passion to start off with. So I think if you have teams internally that are passionate about a brand, passionate about a product, then that authentic feeling comes back to your point, Kristen. I think it's really important now. People want to resonate and have some sort of emotional connection with brands. So I suppose 5 years ago, brands was very much, it's the logo, it's a really cool concept, but really it's more than that. It's a full 360. So it's looking at how your brand is represented, how your internal people are representing their personal brand to represent your brand externally. So it's very much really looking at that and trying to get that passion to come across authentically.
And it really is, it's the shop front really, isn't it? If we draw the comparison with the person, it's how you look, it's how you talk, it's the energy that you give off or not. And so, Melanie, I'd love to get your insight, because in your previous role, you did a really big rebrand, didn't you? So tell us a little bit more about not only how that changed your public perception, but how did that change and how did that look for the teams internally?
So we had to take everyone on a journey, and it very much started internally. We did some workshops, and it was making sure that our colleagues were on the journey and they understood what we were trying to articulate before we went to the market. So we didn't want to surprise anybody. We didn't want anyone sitting in any meetings with any clients or not feeling confident in how they could articulate our new values and our new representation. And it was really interesting, actually. We knew that it had landed and we knew that it resonated when we acquired 2 new businesses, and bringing them into the ecosystem, the Reed & Mackay ecosystem, when we could have our colleagues partnering with them, so we did a buddy system, functions could get to know our culture, and they started to repeat the phrases that we'd used time and time again, and you think, okay, this has landed. Because definitely within our team, we're hammering it home and we're repeating it wherever we can, and we're sharing it all the time, and then when you start to hear it anecdotally in conversations, or you hear people at networking events and they're parroting the phrases that you have really tried to drill home, you think, okay, this is starting to actually be more than words on paper. This is actually starting to be our culture and who we are and what we stand for.
And on that, I think it's important to think about how it comes across to potential new candidates as well. And Christian, I'd love to get your take, because I can imagine that you guys get quite a lot of job applications and you probably get quite a lot of people wanting to. You think to some of the brands like, in a similar vein to maybe Red Bull, is just perceived as being such a fun, engaging brand and company. And I guess people could imagine that working there would be being part of something fun and new. And would you say that in your role as marketing director, that also really works closely with HR and the new recruitment? Because it's very expensive to hire, and to use a recruiter, we could be looking at tens of thousands of pounds per candidate. But if you've got that inbound influx of new talent.
Yes, so usually we get people who apply who know what we do. We don't have to explain what a product is, what our brand stands for. We do, however, still have to pay people. They just come and work for free.
The recruitment union.
So I think what's important is that when you hire people, you hire them for the brand. One question I always ask when I hire for my team is, what's your relationship with nightlife? When's the last time you've been out? When's the last time you've been to a nightclub? How often do you go out? And it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who works for us needs to go out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every week of every year. But at least there needs to be some kind of connection to it, so you can at least feel what the brand is about and relate to the consumers. I think the other one is that you need to be where the brand happens. So you need to follow consumers, you need to be close to consumers, especially when we talk about in an emotional setting, which I believe our brand plays in. So you need to feel at ease going out, going to bars, going to pubs, going to clubs or so, and just observe and see what kind of trends are emerging. And in that sense, that I think is critical. Yes, they need to tick the hard boxes. If you hire a brand manager, they need to know brand management, obviously. But I think, yes, they need to populate a PowerPoint slide, but they also need to understand the environment that we operate in and have a passion for it.
I think it's really interesting saying that, because I think it's all about the connection. So everything is very much around the human connection that you have with the brand, or the human connection that you have with the event. So sometimes I think that's where the passion comes from. So you might have all the value propositions you need, the perfect PowerPoint pitch, but really it's about living and seeing how the brand resonates with people, which is really important.
Absolutely. We've had job interviews in pubs just to see how people react. They say, can you get us a round of pints? And just,
God, I want to work with you guys.
Yeah, so where do we send our CV? And I think that's actually really interesting. Is I'm sure many people in the room, or many people will be going through the challenge that as marketeers, we know the value of having a good brand and a solid brand that speaks to lots of people. But how do you, and I'd love to get your take on this, Olivia, how do you communicate that with a CEO or a board or a budget holder, in terms of they might see it as a cost, or they might see it as a nuisance? Or
I think value proposition is hugely important. It's probably one of the most underrated things in the market at the moment. Equally, you speak to different segments within the market, so each segment needs to have a specific value proposition for that segment. So although every company and every brand has an overarching brand value proposition, each segment within your market, you speak to them differently. So although you'll have the same ethos and the same framework, you still will need to speak to what are the needs and wants for that specific client base. For example, if you're in Jägermeister and you're going to be doing a really high-end event, you'll talk to that market differently than you will be if you're doing an activation and tasting in a pub. So it's about, but the overarching brand will still be the same. So a lot of time needs to be spent on the understanding of those markets. So it's not really about communicating your own value, it's about understanding the value of the segment market and adapting your value proposition to the segment market. And that's something that I think gets lost in translation a lot of the time, if that answers.
Yes, no, I think sometimes it's hard to speak the language of CEOs and those leadership teams or people who are budget holders to get them to really get the buy-in, because ultimately they need to be the ones that are bought into it to sign off on that. And especially in a world where authenticity is becoming more and more important, people want to see that behind the scenes. I think maybe TikTok and some of the new platforms and the way that we're creating content, it definitely lends itself towards your front of house needs to reflect your back of house, and there not to be a big gap or disproportionate opinions, and everything needs to be aligned. And Melanie, I'm curious, in an era where sort of increased transparency and scrutiny are coming in, how do you ensure that the brand promise is consistently delivered by the team?
Obviously, as marketers, we can put, like I said before, we can put best practices on paper, and the deliverability and what goes in front of the clients and the authenticity of that it's getting all facets of the business aligned as much as possible. So we need the senior leaders to be behind us, we need the team leaders to be behind us, but then we also need to hear the voices of all of those teams. As much as the market's disparate, our colleagues are disparate. So the finance team might have a difficulty with a system, and that could be creating huge sort of internal discourse that they're struggling to be aligned to the brand values because their actual day-to-day is a frustration at this point, or something's not working. So we could be selling the dream and have these really great sort of value propositions, but if their actual day-to-day or there's something else that's misaligned, or there's another reason within that team, restructuring or changing or management changes or system changes, they can really affect people's buy-in to the brand and how they're resonating with where they work. And I think that we can't negate that. So we can give presentations to the senior leadership and they can really be brought on, but we need to hear the voices of all of the business, and we need to make sure that we have those touch points. So I advocated to having an employee cab basically, but for our employees. So it was a really open, it was a chance for them, and I didn't sit there as head of brand wanting them to tell me all the things I told them. So I was really interested in what is stopping, what are the blockers, what's stopping you getting on board with this, what does your day-to-day look like in terms of you not resonating with this. So I think it's aligning all of those facets, and then you all go to the market in a much better way. You can have a go-to-market strategy, but there could be other things stopping it. That, yeah, I think
that's the most important thing, as you said, different segments externally, but internally it's just as important. When I would work with different teams on their brand, I have a questionnaire that I would give to everybody in the company. And that's where the magic happens. So it's very simple questions. You ask the same question to the CEO as you would ask to anybody else in any of the teams. And it's trying to pinpoint what are the words that are collectivisms, as I call them, collectivisms across the company, and really going, look at this is the word that really is going to resonate with your brand internally, and then adapt your external strategy to that. But it's really the internal voices. Because there's nothing worse than somebody or a full marketing team creating a full marketing strategy and they haven't gone to the people that live and breathe the brand daily, because that's where the magic is. They could tell you something really crucial that as a marketeer we might not see, because you're very focused on the external rather than the internal. And if you can get somebody who's worked in a business for 40 years to tell you something really unique, and then you can get somebody to work in a business who's been working there 40 days, and you bring the two of them together, that's where the power of brand comes from.
Yeah, and I can see, Christian, you're nodding, but how do you really make sure, because I can imagine, especially for you guys, the team and the people are very much the face of the brand, especially when you're doing a lot of activations. I've seen you at so many festivals and events over the years.
What have you been like?
So
I'll talk about that.
So how do you really empower your employees to become ambassadors, and how do you leverage that as a real marketing tool?
I think it's understanding that your employees are your primary brand ambassadors. So if they work in marketing or in sales or in finance or IT, they're all representative of your brand, especially if it's a brand that is so well known. They will be able to influence their group of friends or their family, etc. So one very simple thing we do is that everyone who works for us has a small budget every month. They can just expense on rounds of shots. So if they go to the pub with...
My accountant would never agree.
Yeah, it's a simple thing, and it's not that everyone depletes the entire amount every month. Some people don't, but it's there. So when you feel the moment is right, it's not everyone we employ goes to the pub all the time. As I said, usually we attract a certain kind of people who like to go out, and when they find themselves in a situation, they say, okay, right now is the moment where I want to show my gratitude and celebrate the moment, whatever it is. Basically just buy some shots for my friends, then, well, all right, you can expense that, which sort of brings to life the brand. Obviously, it also puts some volume into the till of the public. And I think beyond that, though, it's things like keeping them informed about what we do and also inviting them to events, for festivals or so. So we offer it up to our employees to come join us at one of the festivals if they want to. Merch is another good thing. So we have some collaborations with, I don't know, different clothing
bandanas.
Companies.
I tried to find my bandana. I frantically searched the whole house and I was going to wear it, but it was great because it was a dusty festival as well. So people were wearing them as face coverings, so it was like a double-edged.
Yeah, I want to say that was the idea, but that would be
100%. That was your idea, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. But those kind of small things that really make the brand tangible, because if you work with it on a daily basis, it just becomes a logo on a piece of paper on an Excel spreadsheet or so. It stops being the brand, it's just what you work on. But I think we have to reignite that and remind people that what a great thing it is that they're working on and what they're actually contributing to, which I think is something that they can be very proud of.
Absolutely. And I guess it's really interesting because at Electric Cat, we're a small business, so there's only a handful of us. So if we do decide to implement something, it's quite easy to communicate that. But Melanie, you've always worked for larger organisations, and there's so much around that internal comms piece. So how do you do that in practice? How do you really get the teams aligned? And do you have any tips or tricks for the audience?
Tips and tricks are hard without obviously knowing where everybody works, but we were a hybrid business, which again brought its own sort of complexities, and we were a global business. So we just trialled and errored. So we tried having 2 town halls at different times, so different time zones could join. That didn't go down very well, didn't work. We found that the presenter's time, that didn't work. So then we tried, I think that there's just a case of, we want everyone at a town hall, how can we do this? How can we make the watch parties in all of the offices better? So that people do want to turn up to an office to watch something that they're virtually attending. And using these sort of employee advisory boards, really, and just listening to, obviously, we can't, as a team, have a touch point. We did have marketers in most regions, but we can't be in every region. So seeing how our brand's being represented in the building itself. We went to a couple of our offices in Spain, and we noticed that they had their old logo on the wall, and it was just frustrating for the team because they were bringing clients in, and every time they brought somebody in, they were having to explain, no, we're an acquisition, and this was 18 months, 2 years ago, and we're now Reed & Mackay. So I feel that it was definitely trial and error, but listening and then actioning what we can, and then really nailing down on what was important to us. So we rebranded the website as part of the rebrand, and I took photographers and used photographers in region, because it was really important to me that we used our colleagues on the site. We didn't use stock photography, and that was one thing that I made sure was in our budget. I really wanted our people to see themselves on the site and to feel part of this rebrand, and that was something that was really... And as you mentioned before, budgets are tight, and when you're trying to go and you're trying to ask for something, but that was a real line in the sand for me. That was something that we really had to make sure that our colleagues felt represented, and it wasn't, as a UK headquartered business, it wasn't just the UK that was represented. We had to make sure that all of our regions felt part of it. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's tips or tricks, but I would definitely say just finding your line in the sand, thinking what do we really need, listening to your colleagues, and then just working what you can and trying different things to see what lands really.
And there's some brilliant questions in here, so please keep asking away. And I can see that you can actually vote as well. So let's do a thing where if everyone can grab their app and upvote the questions they want to hear next, because I think that will probably make it more relevant for you guys. And in the meantime, Olivia, this question I think is really relevant for you around measuring brand perception, and it is top of the list at the moment. So how do you measure brand perception and sentiment at events, which I guess a lot of people in the room are going to be putting on events for their clients, or they are putting on events for their business? And yeah, how do you measure that and the impact that has?
I think it's very much understanding the attendees. So probably a lot of people in the room here, you've got stakeholders and you want to put on an event, and there's key metrics that you need to get back an ROI as the person and facilitator of the event. But I ask everybody to think about the attendee rather than necessarily the brand or necessarily the actual stakeholder at the beginning of the process, because really it's journey mapping what it's going to be like for an attendee and how your brand can connect at different moments. So again, it's through micro moments, it's through macro moments, and each carry the same ROI. It's really, we look at different data points, asking people to vote on certain things, asking people to scan. And using data, I think it's really important to use the apps and use the data really well, but the data will only show you so much. It's what you do with the data. So when somebody says you could have an amazing event, but if the food, so it is all of the touch points. So it's from the minute that you go in and you scan your badge, is there an issue scanning the badge? So for me and everybody in this room, I'm sure everybody is time poor. So every single minute really that when we're coming to these events, you want ROI, you want to enjoy yourself, but you want to be able to make those connections. And if you're spending time scanning a badge and it doesn't work, if the AV doesn't work, if there's any challenges whatsoever outside of the brand, outside of the keynotes, outside of the big components, I bring it back to a good wedding or a bad wedding, to be honest. It's, if you keep it very simple, it's make sure that the know before you go is done, all the touch points prior to the event, from the moment you step into the event, and then your follow-up afterwards. And then really doing pre-event and post-event. So I do a post-mortem after every event, and it's like pinpointing what went really well, pinpointing what we could do better, and then pinpointing that what didn't work. Now, most companies, when I do that with them, they take it, that didn't work, it was awful, everybody hated it, but I actually try and understand why it didn't work. So is it the environment that was in? Would it be different if it was a different speaker in a different location, or was there a reason why? Because a lot of our events, a lot of time has been spent into curating the event. So if something didn't work and wasn't perceived well, what was the reasoning behind that? Taking that data then and just moving it into next year.
And it's interesting, I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but I've seen recently AI software that will measure people's facial reactions. And so maybe in an audience like a cinema, I don't know how people feel about their whole faces being recorded, which is maybe another subject. But it's really, obviously they probably say they do nothing with it other than just analyse in real time. Are you sad? Are you happy? Are you not expressive? Have you fallen asleep? And I think that is going to be just such a game changer. I don't know how I feel about it, but especially for us as marketeers, it's all about ROI. It's all about the KPIs and the stats and demonstrating to the clients and the budget holders.
We just used that. I'm just back from IMEX, and it was at some of the sessions, and it was really interesting, the data that came out. It's so instant. But it's the connections that actually are making the emotional connection. So it's good.
Yeah. And thank you all for voting in the app. This is brilliant because I now know exactly which questions to ask. And I maybe didn't even need to prep for the session. But Christian, I'm going to come to you for this one because I think this is probably very relevant for you guys at Jägermeister. I think I might know one of the ways you might answer, but how do you build an emotional relationship with your audience? Other than giving them shots?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you think you know how you do it, but how do you measure it? That, I think, is the real question there. So how do you know if you've been successful or not? So we built this framework. I think we're probably all aware of the mental availability, physical availability. So we kind of added a third angle to the triangle and called it emotional availability. And it goes back to experiencing the brand. So we usually happen in environments where what we call is a high tempo or a high energy occasion. Late nights, a full-blown party, for example. Everyone's happy, everyone's smiling, everyone's dancing, loud music, that sort of thing. And that's what we want to recreate, for instance, at festivals or some of our events. But yeah, maybe this AI tool that you mentioned could help us with that, and we've explored some of that, but so far we haven't really found anything that actually does the trick. But what do we measure? We measure how many people come to the festival overall, how many people come to our event. We try to see how long they stay roughly. That already gets a little bit difficult. We can easily measure how much we've sold because we have a bar there. But I think the one thing that is very difficult to put a number on is you arrive, you stand in that room as a 10 by 10 meter activation, and you look around and you can instantaneously tell if you're on the money or not. And if you can see that you have some of the biggest artists of the world sometimes playing at this festival main stage about 300 meters away, yet you have people who have paid hundreds of pounds to get into the festival and spent their entire afternoon at your activation, and you think, okay, we've probably done something right here. So we have a good combination of a good physical setup, so they like it, they like to be there. We have a good lineup, we have a good sound system, ideally we have good drinks as well, and then people stay. But to quantify that is very difficult. I guess the biggest emotion is love, and I don't think you want to quantify that. So I don't know if you want to go home tonight and say, honey, I think it's about 74% love.
No, and I guess for you guys, you can also measure with the bar and the sales, and maybe relative to a similar event with a similar audience where you haven't done the activation, and how much of the quantity, what quantities are being sold.
Yes, yeah, we do that. So I think the lagging metrics afterwards, we measure brand equity. We work with Kantar, we work with a more AI-driven tool called Traction, where we have real-time data, how people react towards the brand. And that gives us a bit of an indication, but of course it's impossible to just isolate one independent variable that really drives the outcome in the equity metrics then. So you have to look at it on a quarterly or a collective annual basis, and then say, okay, this year we really invested a lot in festivals and didn't do anything else, and that metric went up. Well, then at least it's a correlation to really build a sound and a solid causal relationship is probably the next step.
So I'm afraid we are running very tight on time, but we do have time for one last question, which I think, Melanie, would be really good to get your insights. And it has been voted up. We have a question from Hannah Simmons, who's asked, as event professionals, we're often the front face of the brand. Any suggestions, and maybe this is a nice way to end, what would you recommend in terms of a great technique or some tips around how to keep morale up and the team morale up when you're in the thick of it?
Yeah, that's hard. The nature of it, we all know, right? Events aren't for the faint-hearted, and I think that when you're in it, you're in it. But I think, to your point actually, Olivia, to have some really robust feedback and if everybody on the ground knows that there's somewhere they can give their feedback at the end of the day, and that they feel they're going to be heard. So they might have their own experience of working this event or this particular venue that's been chosen, and they are hearing from clients or things on the ground, and they know that they're going to have a really great afternoon wash-up meeting, and it's all going to be heard and it's going to be actioned, and potentially to the point of you wouldn't book the same venue again, or you will have more staff on the ground, or you will, I don't know, move lunch times around so that they do have a bit of a chance to have some sort of food at some point during the day. I think that having somewhere that they know that they can go and they can be heard gives people confidence on the ground that whatever happens, good or bad, there's somewhere that they can share it afterwards, I would say.
I couldn't agree more. Guys, thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure, and I've loved learning so much about all things brand and marketing and how that ties in with events. So could we please get a massive round of applause for our panelists?